Welcome to Wiggly Podcast 52 from the Wiggly Sofa in Herefordshire, rural England. I'm Heather from Wiggly Wigglers and I'm joined today by
Rachel from Wiggly Wigglers.
And Farmer Phil.
Thank you for coming both. We haven't got Ricardo. As we all know, Richard fell off his perch, sadly, and we're going to have a report from Richard from his home, which is called The Folly. So we'll go to that later. But what I must say is welcome to all the new listeners. Podcast 50 was mentioned in the San Francisco Chronicle, and we managed to double our downloads that week. Now, it's either the San Francisco Chronicle or it's because I asked you for a favour, dear listener, and that was to email your friends and ask them if they'd like to listen to the Wiggly Podcast. So I'd like to say to all you double the number of people, could you do the same? That'd be great. And the other thing is that Rach makes lots and lots of CDs, don't you, Rach, of the Wiggly Podcast?
I do, yeah. We distribute them wherever we can.
And so I wondered if I mentioned on the show that if the listener's friend hasn't got a way of listening to broadband, would you make the friend a CD?
Yep, no problem at all.
And post it?
Yep.
To wherever they are in the world?
Wherever they are in the world.
That's
no problem at all.
Guarantee from Rach.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rach. No moaning afterwards.
No.
So, if you want to have a wiggly dip, a dip into life at Wiggly Wigglers, now's the chance. And if you haven't put a review up on iTunes, please, would you go and do it? Because we've still only got 17 on the UK one and 3 on the US site. Or put a review up on your personal podcatcher. Anyway, today we've got coming up Farmer Phil.
Bit of an update on sunflowers, I think. Bit of a comment on Ricardo's demise, I suspect.
Acorns.
Acorns, yes, not good.
Okay, and we've got Rachel, who is going to demo log making.
With paper, with your waste newspaper. Even the San Francisco Chronicle can be made into a log.
Oh, the one you've got there seems to have got Tony Blair in a set of trunks.
Yeah. The sample that we used, the newspaper, Tony happened to be on holiday in the Caribbean or Bermuda or somewhere like that, and he makes a good log.
I can't wait to burn him.
Excellent.
We're going to light the Wiggly wood burner with the logs and see how we go in a while. And logs may feature in the outtakes, actually. Have you been round here before?
Yeah.
To look at the scene?
Just looking up, you can't see it. There's about 22 foot up. I put the ladder and then I sort of galloped up the ladder to try scraping the fascia boards, you see, that I already started.
What sort of ladder was it?
Oh, it's a wooden one. It's
Well,
a wooden
yeah.
ladder. Shall we see it? Shall we go and have a look at the wooden ladder?
Why not?
Because the funny thing is that I did repair the wooden ladder at one stage, but it hasn't broken where I repaired it. It's broken below the repair. So
Oh, that's all right
so in
then.
a way, it's good. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great. So we're off to see the ladder.
to see. Ladder. Right. Yeah, so I hit the floor here. You see, this is the difficulty I was faced with because I came down from up there. You can see the
What
gash
about
in the
those
gravel.
bricks?
Yeah, and that was the difficulty I was faced with because as I was plummeting down, I was trying to avoid these bricks. So of course, as I hit the deck, I thought I'd try and roll. You see, but instead of rolling, I drove my left side of my body into the lawn in an attempt to avoid these bricks edgings. And as a consequence, that's why I broke my wrist so badly and smashed the heel bone, because those were the parts of my body that I stuck out to try and protect myself and sort of smashed into the ground. But fortunately, I missed a brick. I've got a graze just on the inside of my leg there. Look.
Oh, yeah.
I hit one of the bricks, but nothing too bad at all. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, couldn't it? Long way up.
Could have been better.
Even longer for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You only fell a few feet, really.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think it was like a spitting distance, really.
So this ladder
Yeah.
that you were using.
Yeah,
Could you give me
go
a
and
bit
have
of...
a look at it? Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it was a great ladder. It looked like a great ladder, but so
steady.
as opposed to borrowing a ladder, I thought, well, I'll use this one. And
Or even buying
or
a
even
ladder.
buying one, yeah.
Yeah, obviously
I'll
that
use
would be
this,
ridiculous.
And then this would
Oh,
be
yeah.
ideal. And you can say
Oh no, Rich.
There you go. That's what it looks like.
Oh.
But you see here where I fixed it here.
Right.
You see,
Okay.
I fixed it there, and it hasn't broken where I fixed it. It broke just below where I fixed it. So I'm quite happy that my repair work was up to it. But
how do I put this, dear listener? I am looking at a wooden rickety ladder which has the most crude attempt to mend it that I have ever seen in my whole existence.
there's at least 4 screws in that.
If Pip were here, he would actually
I think Pip
cry.
would frown at that.
Yeah. And what's happened is that the guy who's meant this ladder has braced it with 2 extra pieces of wood, which is obviously completely stressed underneath the brake, and has actually caused the whole thing to split completely in half in one go.
Yeah.
It is definitely broken.
Not good, is it?
Not
good at all.
good.
So there's a lesson to
So
be
was that
learned.
at the top then, Rich?
Yeah, that's at the top. So I was stood, because it's obviously the top end of the thing, so I was stood up here somewhere, and you can see how long the ladder is, when you put the 2 sections together. So this was up, and I was up here somewhere. And
You
crunch
couldn't
it
run
went.
down it.
And I was like, no, because I could feel it going beneath me, you see.
Yeah.
And it was like an automatic thing to leap away from this bit, because I suddenly thought, well, if I fall head first, because I'm being let down, I suddenly realised how high I was up, because you don't really realise you're carrying on, you're scrubbing the fascia board and stuff like that, and not really thinking about how high you are up. And as I looked down, it was a long way down, and I just thought to myself, God, I hope I'm going to be all right. And then, of course, within a split second, really hit the floor, and then the most excruciating pain shot through my ankle and my wrist, and I couldn't get up, I couldn't move really, and I thought, well, I was on my own because Sarah wasn't around, and I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? So I crawled to the hedge and screamed down to the valley, screaming Sarah, because I knew she was talking to her mate in the field with the horses.
Did you not
And
think
I
of
screamed,
help?
Scream.
Help.
Well, no, I don't want to say help, because you'd have all sorts of people running up then.
You don't want it, do you?
No, I remember we were on holiday in Greece once. My gran hit her head she had a bit of a funny turn, and she hit her head on the apartment wall. And as I was a child, I was a bit panicky, and I ran out this apartment building side shouting, help, help, help. Where there were like 1 million people outside the door. And Mum said, what have you done? This is even worse than coping with your gran. So that memory sticks in my mind. So I sort of avoided shouting help and just went for the individual Sarah, and she thought it was some yobbo screaming from up the road, and but it was me. And anyway, the neighbours just below heard, and they came to the gate, and they could see my head poking over the hedge. And they said, Richard, are you all right? And I said, no, not really.
No.
Not really. And I was just amazed by the whole, how ridiculous the whole thing was. And they came running up anyway to my rescue and managed to get me up in a chair and get my foot up. And then they called the ambulance, and out it came with the necessary bags full of morphine, and strapped me to a chair and took me off.
Right, be careful now then.
So and that was the end of that particular.
And so the
experience.
Result?
Well,
what are we dealing with
the
here?
result, well-
Obviously, the listener can hear us
creeping
crutching
along
around
the
house on the gravel.
The
And
result
I can
of-
happily say that Richard looks like a sort of balmy African explorer in his shorts and
What
explorer
I've
shirt.
dribbled a bit of food down, and there's a bit of like pasta sauce and stuff all down my shirt, because I can't sit up properly because my leg I have to stretch out, so I'm sort of accidentally dribbling down myself every night. And Sarah looks across and says, "Oh," and tries to lift me up and reposition me.
It looks slightly balmy because his hair's too long,
Yeah.
and he's got looks like a broken arm and a broken leg. But shall we go back and sit down, because I can't bear for you to struggle much more, and tell us what has happened,
Should we talk
what
about,
the results are.
Yeah, we should do that. Well, I mean, the results are, it's not looking too bad. Within the next few weeks, I'll be up and running.
Well, hope that puts you in the picture about what happened to dear Richard.
It does raise 1 or 2 issues, though, doesn't it? The preservation of woodworm is not a good idea with wooden ladders.
Poor Rich, he's going to take so much stick for years to come, isn't he,
know.
on about this?
And it is very funny when you go and see him. I went up to the path and I just waited to try and compose myself so I didn't laugh at him. And I waited too long and it just escaped. Anyway, on with the show, my dears. Rach, it's log maker demo time.
Oh, brilliant.
Tell me what you've got and tell me what you're going to do. And I can't wait because, as you know, Farmer Phil is a little bit tight in the old fuel department.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like us putting on our radiators. If any listener doesn't know, we get to put the whole lot on Boxing Day, which is day after Christmas Day. And apart from that, it's banned.
Yeah.
So it's great for me to see you with this log maker in the sitting room because there is the Jotel wood burner waiting to be lit.
Right, fantastic. Okay, well, our new product for the next Wiggly catalogue, and it'll be up on the website, is the Wiggly Log Maker.
No promotion, please.
sorry,
Just tell us
sorry.
about the product.
Okay, the product is basically a plastic tube and an inner plunger. So you get your tube, you wrap the newspaper around the outside of the tube, like so.
Haven't you got much on in the evening? Or?
Well, telly is a bit boring, really. It's a bit boring and nothing
I think
much
it's much
on.
better that Rach makes the firewood than I have to cut it, I must say.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is recycling. This is wood in your front room.
No,
So-
Rachel's paper.
Oh, no, it's wood, really, honestly. So anyway, you wrapped your paper around the tube. At the bottom of it, you just fold it over the end. And so my ripped up newspaper now gets scrunched up and dropped into the centre of the tube.
Can I rip up Boris Johnson?
You can rip up Boris Johnson and put Boris in, yeah. No
As
problem
we've
at
had
all.
Tony Blair.
Yeah. So put small amounts in to start off with. I got Boris, there he goes, in the log maker. Then get your plunger
Right.
and push it into the centre of the tube. Now you have to be quite forceful at this stage, and you're pressing down.
Being forceful will suit you then, Rach.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go. I've scrunched the first bit down to the bottom of the centre of the tube. Now pull out my plunger and more bits of scrunched up newspaper. All in the centre, like so.
Joe's been doing this.
Yeah.
Joe's on the Wiggly phone, isn't she?
Yeah. Jo is one of the Wiggly team here, and she's been actually taking this home and has trialled it as well. So
How many
more in the
logs
centre.
has she managed to make?
Well, she's got her husband on the job while she's probably cooking the tea. So he's been making these logs for her, and he's made several of them.
I've got to say, Rach, it's going to take you
Okay.
more than 5 minutes to fill the log basket, isn't it?
Well, you know, you've got a lot of paper. You're
You've got to
recycling
chop
here.
down the tree and you've
Yeah.
got to...
Yeah,
True,
I don't
you've got to
tend to
collect the
chop
wood
down
in.
trees just to make firewood. I use hedge trimmings and thinnings and
Yeah,
waste
but
bits
you
of
still
trees.
got to go out
So
and collect,
they've got to get
sort
cut
it.
anyway.
This is the item
Also, I've
for
got
you.
to say, I am thoroughly in favour of recycling stuff without having to drive it all around the countryside.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
that instead of
Yeah.
collecting your paper, driving it 3 times around the county and then throwing it in a hole anyway,
Yeah.
it seems much more sense to use it like this.
Right, so I've now got it compacted in my log maker.
Right, this
So-
is going to be the wow moment.
This is going to be the wow moments, okay? I push out of the bottom, so the centre part that you've been plunging is now in the centre of the roll of paper that you originally put around the outside of the tube. So you end up with a
Log.
tube of log. And so then you have a bit of excess paper at the top, which you now twirl round, and you have your log tube. There we are.
Why don't
And-
you just put the newspaper on the fire?
Because if you put sheets of newspaper on the fire, they don't burn. They just stay there. And that you can go to the fire the next day and you can still see your compacted newspaper. By making logs out of them, you're in effect getting air amongst the scrunched up bits of paper, so they actually burn.
Right, let's go to the burn.
Right, well, what we'll do is just like we'd make a normal fire, so we'll scrunch up some loose newspaper and make a bed underneath, and then we'll put the newspaper logs on top.
Go on then.
All right, ready, Rach?
There we go.
Let's go. The chimney's a bit cold, so we don't know whether it'll go well, but anyway, so far so good.
Oh, it's drawing well now, Phil.
Oh, I can hear it.
Could be ready for takeoff.
Mind you don't melt the mic, Rach.
Okay, I've moved it back now away from the fire. Well, we've got some good flames going on at the moment.
Is it going to burn too quick?
Well, it's burning, so we'll find out in a
then.
minute.
Confident enough to shut it down? Right, we'll come back to that in a
Yep.
minute. And we'll also ask Jo how her logs burn up in Kinkton. So, Farmer Phil, while the logs burn, tell us about this week on the farm.
Well, this week on the farm, there have been some good points and bad. We're ongoing sunflower saga now because Patrick, our colleague who's also got a crop of sunflowers, was confident he was going to combine his in September. I am now looking at December as being the likely combining date. They are still very healthy and very green and quite tall. So we think December probably is the likely time for that.
And is there any chance of combining in December?
We'll find that out when we get there. Obviously we can't do it when it's wet and rainy, so we might be reduced to trying to do it in a frost. But being as we've never tried before, we'll find out, won't we?
I met up with Angus Dalton yesterday, who's a farmer from, I think, Leicestershire.
Yeah.
And he grows sunflowers for cut flowers. And he said that because of the weather in the summer, they didn't grow, and then they grew like mad. And so instead of having several sunflowers to every metre, they ended up with one enormous one. They said that the farmers and the men really liked them. They took home one sunflower for their wife. But the wives weren't that keen, so they sold like one for £1 and took it home.
I think that ours seem to be right in terms of size and thickness and all the rest of it. It's just that they don't feel inclined to ripen yet. But they'll change. Once we have the odd frost, they weren't like that, so that should ripen them off. And they've set plenty of seed, so fingers crossed. And then a bit of a sad story, really. We noticed we had a few cattle in the field here by the house, and this year we've noticed there's been an enormous crop of acorns.
They keep dropping on the roof of the car. Have you heard them? Everywhere you go, there's this big bang, and
That's
it's
right.
acorns
It
Yeah,
must
I've
be
seen
a
lots
very
of them.
good year for acorns, and we were aware of the possibility that once we had a bit of a wind and they blew some off the trees, that the cattle might eat them, and sure enough, they started to eat them. So we moved the cattle away from them. 3 days later, one of the cattle showed signs of fairly serious bellyache, and we got the vet, and it did look very much like acorn poisoning, and treated her, and we thought that was fine. It was 3 days after she'd had the last acorn, and then we treated her for the second time, and I'm afraid she dropped dead of shock. And when we post-mortemed her, the acorn poisoning had destroyed the lining of her gut. And so it was rather sad and quite unfortunate, and I'm afraid that I have to put it down to our own failures of management. It was our
How
fault.
come sheep and pigs can cope with them?
Well, pigs can cope with them because their digestive system doesn't work the same, and we think sheep can deal with them because they don't eat anything like as many. Cows seem to get addicted to them. It causes the gut to become static and constipated, and then the toxins within the acorns poison the gut.
Now, I really wanted to talk about nettles on this week's show because Ricky has a lot to tell us about nettles, and strangely enough, nettles have been used for hundreds of years to help out with bellyache.
Oh.
So we shall hear about them next week. Why do the cattle eat something that's poisonous? Normally animals don't do that, do they?
They don't, but it's not infallible. Strange things happen. For example, things that we know to be very poisonous, like ragwort. If you cut ragwort down or wilt it, it immediately becomes very palatable, and they can't resist it, but it will kill them pretty much straight away. And there are one or two things like that. Some of the nightshades become very palatable when they're wilted and things like that. Buttercups are another one that will give them serious bellyache. So that those are management issues, and I just assume that ripe acorns, they like them, they like the crunchiness, and they presumably like the taste. They do seem to get addicted to them, that once they start eating them, they can't stop, and you'll have one or two animals that will just go after them and they'll just hoover them up. Tony Dale, our neighbour, told me a funny story last night which demonstrates that sheep can get away with them, because he'd got some sheep in a field that part of it was a copse of oak, and they'd eaten all the acorns on the floor, and he said when you went in the morning to see the sheep, they were all standing round in the trees, and if they heard an acorn fall down, they all dashed off towards where they heard it fall to get hold of it. And he said it was very funny to watch them.
Our new catalogue's coming out. Ooh, catalogue day!
Exciting.
That
I think
comes
I've
out.
made the back page, haven't I?
Let's have a
Let's have a
look.
look.
Actually, on the front page, we've got a new slogan, Rach. Do you want to read that out?
Yeah, the new slogan is all the ingredients for your organic country lifestyle.
I like it, and it comes from Amy Stewart's San Francisco Chronicle article. So we're actually Americanised. I don't know what happened, but Phil is on the back.
Bit balmy.
Well, not as balmy as the picture on the blog. And there he is with toast in the sunflowers.
In the sunflowers.
We got lots of feedback coming in, so I'll read it out. This is a letter from Gwen, and she says, "Hello Heather and everyone. Sorry to hear Ricardo is not well, and sorry there's no podcast last week because you were having a lovely time in California. I live in Bristol and have to travel to London, Paris and other smelly European capitals with work. And I always make sure I have loads of podcasts to listen to as I move about. It's not all glamorous, despite what most people think. The other day I even saw a woman having a wee on the metro in Paris. Yuck.
I think that's pretty dangerous, given that you're on an electric railway. I think that might have given them more of a fright.
Woo. Anyway, I always keep your podcasts for the moments I'm feeling at my lowest about being away from home and my beloved. I grew up in darkest Worcestershire and my parents live in Herefordshire now, so it's great to hear what's going on in the real world. Anyway, it's just a short note to say thanks for your podcasts, as they really cheer me up." And that's from Gwen. And then we've got a comment from ecologist Martin Bailey from Wildlife and Countryside Services. And he says, "I'd like to point out that Phil's comment about the supposed benign nature of Roundup is not as true as he might suppose. There is evidence that it can be extremely harmful to amphibians, and this should be borne in mind whenever he or anyone else uses it. Obviously, this would have a detrimental effect on your great crested newts, probably killing large numbers of them if they were to come into contact with it. Just thought you'd like to know, Martin." And you've been emailing back, haven't you, Phil?
Yeah, we've had a bit of a conflab on the subject because, as you listeners might recall, Ricardo and I had a bit of a conflab on the subject last week or a fortnight ago. To cut a long story short, my research into it has shown that it's not actually the glyphosate which is toxic to the amphibians. It would appear to be the wetters, which is what Ricardo had brought up. And to my knowledge, there are several different formulations of Roundup, but they've all got glyphosate in, which is the active ingredient, but the wetters are all different.
What's the wetter?
The wetter is the bit that makes the active ingredient stick to the target plant, and there are different chemicals used, and according to which wetter they use, that depends on what recommendations they make for the use of that particular chemical. So that I've got 2 examples of Roundup in my chemical shed, and one of them has got the taloamine wetter, which is a natural wetter. Now I can use that in aquatic environments to kill waterweed in ditches and so on, and that's because that is not toxic to amphibians, fish or anything else like that, and it is totally benign. But I've got another formulation for use out in the fields which specifically says that I shouldn't use it near watercourses. Different wetter, harmful to fish and amphibians, so I've got to be more careful with it. And we've also been talking a little bit about how the soil denatures chemicals that we put on the land, and it's the clay fraction in the soil which locks up these chemicals, and so that there is some concern or some consideration should be given to what soil you're on. So if you're on a very light sandy soil that the water can wash chemicals through it and into the watercourse, then you have to be more careful than if you're on a heavier clay soil. And the other point that we made was that the regulations are different in different countries. And Europe is probably the most tightly regulated area in the world with regard to pesticides and their use. And therefore, I'm quite confident in saying that the recommendations that are given out to us are right. And there were a number of websites that Martin pointed me towards, which I've been and visited and read. And I have to say, although there are relevant points made, they're very generalised and they don't differentiate between the different formulations, and they make some very sweeping comments in terms of their conclusions. I've got a feeling that most of their results have to be treated with quite a lot of caution because they're too general.
But much better not to use it altogether.
Maybe if you don't need to, but having said that, it is one chemical that I think is very acceptable to use and very useful. But as with any chemical, you've got to use it according to the advice given with it.
Richard very occasionally says if there's something in your garden like couch grass, you either put some Roundup on it or you suffer the fact that you're going to be digging forever. So what do gardeners need to look out for when they're using this chemical? Because do garden chemicals have these different wetters in them?
They absolutely do, and I think that the key piece of advice is that if you want to use a chemical for a specific task, say to treat some cooch or whatever in the garden, make sure that you obey the rates that are given in the instructions with the chemical, but make sure that you use it in such a way that it only gets to where you want it to go. So don't waft it round the place and get it in the pond or over the wall into the neighbour's garden and all the rest of it. If you use it responsibly and sensibly, that'll be fine.
Just before we go, 2 little pieces of Wiggly gossip. Rach, we've got some new team members. Would you like to welcome them on board?
Yeah, we've got a couple of new Wiggly team members, and we have Hannah and Karen. And Hannah's already started. Karen will be starting in a couple of weeks' time.
And welcome to Dan, who started Dan Amy's
Yes.
just a couple of weeks ago. And shortly, we've got Jan.
Jan, yep, we're going to have a pool team of workers, and Jan will be one of them, and she'll be coming in soon.
And Dick and Dan have both passed their forklift tests.
So, going back to the Jotel, what's going on?
Back over to the Jotel.
Rach is just going to open it up,
Okay.
and just as she does so, I must just tell you about the Wiggly t-shirts. They become a bit cult in the village. They become cult shirts. We've got young folk coming to Wigglers for their Wiggly t-shirt. Now, the most popular design is Wigglers Do It Naturally. So I'm not sure what's going on, but apparently the clubs and pubs of Hereford are awash with Wiggly shirts.
Well,
Wow.
I've always said we were trendsetters, particularly myself, as you know.
The height of trend, the Wiggly t-shirt.
I'll get myself one right now. Okay, well, immediately on going up to the Jotel fire, I've got a nice feeling of warmth from around it, so I'm going to open it up. Oh, yeah. Look at that. We have burnt out logs with a lovely glow in the centre. One which is 3 parts burnt and is still smouldering away, so good heat coming out from that. I would say that this is a success.
And I've got to say that there doesn't appear to be a vast amount of ash, so it has burnt it well.
Also, that's probably one whole newspaper. If we'd have put that newspaper on without making the log, that would have been well over with no heat. All the heat goes up the chimney, doesn't it, when you use the newspaper?
I think that's quite impressive.
So the upshot is, if you can be bothered to make the logs, it's great.
Yeah, they work. If you can be bothered to make them, they work.
They probably work better in a wood burner than they would in an open fire, perhaps.
We'll ask Jo, because I think Jo's got an open fire, hasn't she, Rach?
Yes, I think she has. Whereas these Jotels, you're able to regulate them easily, and so you can control their burning rate. But anyway, that, I would say, was a Wiggly success.
Fantastic. Next week, Ricky's coming in to talk about nettles. I found out loads about nettles. Handy old things, nettles. And my search has taken me to Australia.
Woo!
So that's coming up next week, and hopefully we'll have another report from Ricardo. Not the roving reporter, the static reporter.
I presume he'll be passing comment at the safe working at height directives that the government brought out last year.
Yes, thank goodness he wasn't at Wiggly Wigglers.
No, absolutely.
We've had the health and safety man round yesterday to inspect the place, and he says we're doing everything just so. So hopefully nothing will go wrong this week. Touch wood.
Yes.
The Wiggly cold store is being built as we speak, and it's going to be installed on the 16th of October, so we look forward to that.
That'll house all our worms and mealworms.
Absolutely. And so it's bye from us on the Wiggly sofa.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Because of course they won't let you leave hospital unless you have a bowel movement, because they don't want you to, they don't want your spleen to split or rupture or something like that. So of course they said, well, you can leave, but we can't discharge you unless you've had a proper bowel movement. And so I thought, oh gosh, I really want to leave with a clean slate. I don't want to have to discharge myself. So lots of oranges, lots of apples. Loads of water, nothing. No, bit of remote grumbling. And this is a week now. I haven't been. I'm going to leave for a week. They were obviously conscious that there was quite a build-up. So I thought, oh God. So anyway, I said, well, the options are what can I do? So, well, you can do some suppositories. So I said, okay. well, we'll give that a go. So the nurse came in and said, would you like to do this yourself, or should I do it? And I said, oh, well, I can probably manage to do it.
Yeah.
That's really, it's quite an uncomfortable experience. And the funny thing about those suppositories is they're shaped like a bullet, and you imagine that, you know, that the pointed end would be the one you insert first, but in actual fact, no, it's the blunt end that goes in first. Oh my God! So anyway, lots of fun and games trying to do that. Of course, it didn't work, did it? It was only a little bit of my bowel that kind of crept out, so that didn't work. And then I had to have the next step was an enema, which had to be administered by one of the nurses. So there I was, arse bared to the world. In comes the male nurse. Says, right. So oh God, the indignity of it all. So I laid on my bed, and he did what he had to do. And so that was it. I had to wait. Then he said, oh, if you can wait for 20 minutes or so. So I waited 20 minutes. 20 minutes went. 3/4 an hour went. A couple of hours went. Nothing. No movement at all. So this was Friday night, and I really wanted to go home. I was so desperate to come home. You know, I'd been in that place for all that time. I wanted to come home, but no. So I thought, oh God, well, I might as well stay here tonight. No, Friday night. So I stayed there another night in hospital. And in the morning, Saturday morning, Sarah bought some concentrated organic prune juice.
Good girl.
That had worked for her in the past. I had a couple of glugs of that stuff, 3 more oranges. And anyway, you can feel that things were starting to move a bit. Anyway, I managed to go to the loo, and you know what? I've never been so ecstatic, almost euphoric from being able to go to the loo. Anyway, managed to go, and I had my friend, and it was funny because when I told the nurse, I said, look, I've been to the loo, I've left it in there for you to see, because I wanted to make sure that they knew what the situation was. I didn't want them to think that, you know, that I was making things up. And he said, I said, oh well, that's fine anyway. But when he walked back down to the end of the hospital ward, I could hear this, "Way!" They'd obviously been discussing about this poor fellow in room 41 or whatever couldn't go to the loo and had to stay in hospital and on that basis.